What's up, everybody? So I just got done fishing the final MLF Toyota Series event on my home body of water, the Delta. The dates were June 5th through the 7th. And just to give you kind of a synopsis, I'll start with that, of how that tournament ended up. Christian Melton, who's an out-of-towner. Not only did he win 2024 Angler of the Year award, he also sealed the deal by being the champion of the Delta. So hats off to him. I mean, he had a great year. He started off Clear Lake, I think, with 5th, got 2nd at Lake Havasu, and won on the Delta, right? I mean, that's pretty dream season, right? Tremendous angler. So he ended up winning the Delta with 61.07, and he cleared 2nd place by almost 5 pounds. So that's a, pretty secure win. He had days of 18:10, 22, and 20:13 to win. So what I'm going to do is go over mostly the mistakes that I made in that tournament, and so I think there's a lot to learn from having a tournament like I did. So where I finished a 34th, which is highly disappointing for me, and I had 14:12 on day 1. And then I weighed 10:08 on day 5. So my total was 25:04. I ended up missing the cut. Let's see, 25th place, or actually 26th place, which didn't make the cut, was 26:05. So, yeah, I was, 1 pound out of making the cut. And that's any one fish over the course of the first 2 days. So it was June, Delta, and so I'm going to set up the fishery for you. It's a tidal body, it's a tidal fishery, and the Pacific Ocean influences it. There's typically 4 tides, 2 highs, 2 lows in a 24-hour period. Sometimes there's only 3, and we had a late spawn. I don't know why this year there was a late spawn, but there was. Last year there was an immense amount of water that came into our system from the epic rains that we had in Northern California. And it raised the Sac River, some weeks it raised the Sacramento River like 14 to 16 feet. So all that water came in, and the water color last year was just horrible. It was chocolate milk pretty much through 90% of the system. And that just made it difficult. This year, we did have a lot of water, but it was more gradual, not as sudden. So although there was a lot of water that came through the system, we did not get that sudden rush of water, which did not dirty the system up early in the year like it did last year. So it's set up more traditional Delta. Although it was a high water year, it wasn't a high water dirty year. And for whatever reason, there was a late spawn. The weights, pretty much the stats from the weights all spring supported that. Starting around early May. Yeah, about early May. The weights actually went up for what it took to win local team tournaments and other things like that. And then starting in May, there was these bigger bags coming in. There was a 26-pound bag weighed in on a Wednesday night event. That same week, there was a team event that took 25 pounds. What was most impressive is that in those tournaments, 15th place was 20th place. No, I'm sorry, 15 pounds was 20th place. So, anytime you can catch a 3 pound average anywhere in the country in late May and June, pretty good fishery, right? So, but it was consistent, right? It would take, team tournaments, 15 pounds was either in 19th or 21st place. So that gives us an indication of, that there are probably a lot of 3 pounders biting. When you have 20 teams catching 15 pounds or more, that's a lot of 3 pounders biting. And then starting in May, there were a lot more big fish being weighed in, sevens, occasional 8 pounders, and then when you look at the fish, they were fat and they looked pregnant, at least the females did. So we did have a late spawn, and that late spawn basically, in my opinion, went into the middle of June. Now, fish spawning on the Delta in mid-June is not rare, but there was a big wave of them, typically in June, it's 85% done, meaning 85% of the fish have already spawned. So there's like maybe 15% that are still spawning and pre-spawn. This year, I would say in June, leading into this tournament, I would say maybe only about 60 to 65% of the system had actually gone. There was a big wave of them going leading into the tournament. There was a wave of them going during the tournament, and then there was some that obviously were going to go after the tournament. So it was a little unusual for me. I really it was a tale of two completely different days. The first day, and I got to do things that I thoroughly enjoy doing on the Delta. But the first day, let me go into practice first. So leading into the tournament, the fishing was really good, and there was a lot of activity, a lot of fish biting. I had days where I was getting 35. I had one day in practice where I had 55 bites. So there was a lot of fish biting, and it was still not easy for me to catch the difference makers. But there were a lot of I'll say 2.25 to 3.25 pounders biting, activity levels, and then you periodically you could bang a 5 or a 7 or something like that. That's the kind of tournament that I felt that it was going to be. And then leading into the tournament and all May, we had a really nice, what I would call Delta breeze, nothing too windy, but just a really nice breeze every day. It was blowing like, I would say 8 to 12, and then there was some days where it would get a little bit into that 15 range. And then leading into the tournament, we had, of course we had a weather change, right? So it was the weather I described, and then the day before the tournament and the 2 days before the tournament, the wind came in. Started one of the days it blew like 20, and that's okay, right? Because everybody's got to deal with it. But the wind blew like 20, and what was concerning is the weather that was coming, right? So it had pretty much been like in the 80s with the wind for weeks, and then on the the day before the first day of the tournament, it was like 100. So there was a significant weather coming in. And the first day of the tournament, it was like 104. Okay, so what happened is the wind came in, was blowing that system out that was sitting here, and it was blowing in a high pressure system. That's why the wind blew so hard the last day of practice the last day of practice, basically. Because into the first day of the tournament, the wind didn't blow that hard. So, out goes the nice wind and the 80-degree weather. In comes the high pressure. And it was like 100, 104, and 100 for me on the first 2 tournament days. So, you know, not making any excuses, just kind of setting up what was going on. So, you know, leading into it, I felt like it was going to play into my hands, even with the hot weather, you know, because I was catching a lot of fish, throwing topwater, punching, and frogging. And that's basically what I did on day 1. Okay. So I made my first cast of the morning with the frog. And in practice, I had figured out that, you know, they wanted, for me, right, they wanted this black and red spro frog. It's Black Widow. Like I said, not sponsored by them. I like throwing it. It's a great frog. I throw it on 60 AMZ Sunline 8. And I throw it on a 200 XG and a 7.5 foot, like medium to medium heavy-ish Loomis rod. So, you know, the first day I probably caught 4 or 5 on the frog. One of them made the show, but it definitely was not the bite, the activity level that we had in practice, right? I could tell almost within the first hour that the fish were going to bite different on day 1, which they did. Okay. The second thing I threw was a buzzer. Okay. So this is a single buzz. You know, it's a single buzz. It's a Buckeye Berserk. You know, some of the places I was fishing, the water was a little bit tannicky. You know, it wasn't dirty. It was just that kind of rusty, brownish type kind of water. And when the water clarity gets like that, I like to go to gold. Okay, so I like the gold blade. You know, I have a Big Bite Tour toad on here, and I actually dyed it chartreuse. This was white. You know, so I dipped it in chartreuse because I wanted that chartreuse color to stand up in that kind of, like I said, I don't want to call it muddy, but in that tangy water. So, and then, you know, this buzzbait makes a lot of racket. You know, it's got a great keeper on it. So, and then I threw this. I like throwing a single buzz on a Corrado 200 XG. And the reason is because, you know, a single buzz moves faster than a double buzz, doesn't drag as much water. So I like a higher speed reel for that, so I can get that bait moving across. 7.5 foot, kind of medium heavy Loomis JWR 893 rod. And then I throw it on the same line as I frog with, that green Sunline AMZ 8. Casts really good, it's smooth, you know, just great line for both of those things. And I in practice, I was probably getting 8 to 10 bites on a buzzer. First day of the tournament, I got 2. You know, so, but I still threw it, and, you know, I didn't have any big ones eat it. But where, you know, and what I like to do is I like to throw that frog around big stuff. It's not always matted. You know, sometimes it could just be a grass clump. Other times it could be, you know, a big tree next to a piling. You know, it's just something big, you know, big old tule clump. You know, anywhere where I think fish are spawning, that's where I like to throw that frog, especially in those kind of open water, open-ish water situations. And then that day, the only other thing, pretty much the only other thing that I did was flip, right? Flip, pitch, or punch. And, you know, I sound like a broken record, but this is my standard get down. I had some other baits on too, but, you know, standard get down, you know, Chronarch 150 MGL, 80 braid. I'm using the Owner 3/0 and 4/0 Jungle HD hook. I went to that. G-Money punch skirt, tungsten weight, and then I started off throwing a Yo Mama, okay? So, and then I pretty much had an ounce and a quarter, an ounce and a half. I also threw let's see. It was funny, you know, as funny as they were biting on day one, you know, I had 45 bites. I only hooked like, I only hooked and boated like 17 of them, you know, and they were just, you know, I think, again, not an excuse. I just think that change in weather and that high pressure just had them biting really funky, you know, and then, you know, obviously the fish shrunk for me to weigh 14 pounds. You know, you know, I mean, I had 2 fish that I needed. I had one that was like a 5.5, and I had a 4, so I had 9 pounds. And the other fish, you see how small they were. I weighed, you know, almost 15 pounds, like 14.12 or 14.14. So I had almost 15 pounds. And going into day one, I said, well, you know, if things didn't go well, I would weigh 14 or 15 pounds, right? So, you know, and things didn't go well for me, so I weighed about what I felt I would need to stay in touch with what it was going to take to win, right? So the result wasn't disastrous, but just some of the, and I don't even want to say my execution was bad. You know, just there's some days where the fish are biting a little funky. And then you change, and some of the things that I changed to, right, that day, right, so I actually went, I got 2 of these, okay, so I was throwing this, okay, so these were the other baits that I threw throughout the day. You know, and you know, a lot of times for me, it maybe sound like a broken record, but you know, I threw a missile crawl. Like I said, this is discontinued. I love this bait, but you know, and then as I said, I'm starting to replace it with that bait because they're very similar in color and size and profile. This is a Big Bite Kamikaze swim on, originally designed as a trailer, right? But, you know, it's got these little fork tails, right, which are very similar. Like you look at these and, you know, it's very similar. In stature is very similar, in profile, very similar in shape. The other bait that I threw, and I think it's a great bait, I just don't throw it a lot. And the reason I don't throw it a lot for me is because a lot of people throw it. And I always like to do something a little bit different. You know, I don't know, it's just something I've always done. But this is a missile baits debone, and I did throw this, and you know, and I caught fish on all 4 baits. But you know, sometimes, you know, there's a specific color that gets in your head or things like that. So you know, I'm not into the bright reds on the Delta. I know people catch them, you know, like on Firecracker and things like that. So because of the watercolor, I did want something a little bit brighter, so I would throw this on occasion, right? And mainly to get a difference in color from, you know, from the PB&J Yo Mama. So that's what I did basically. It was a 3-rod deal on day one, and like I said, I probably had like 45 bites. I caught 17 keepers. My best 5 that I weighed in was 14.12. So 14 3/4. You know, so yeah, I had so many opportunities and things like that on day one that, you know, when I look back, I don't look back and think that I was asleep at the wheel, not focused. Not throwing the right bait, you know, etc. You know, to fish the way that I wanted to fish, I felt like I was generating enough bites and enough interest to do right. And then, you know, once you have 14.12, you know, I'm just like, okay, well, you know, the way that, you know, as many 2 1/4 and 3 1/4 pound fish were biting, I would just like, okay, well, if I just catch 3 2.5ers, you know, that'll move me into 17.5, 18 pounds, which, you know, I felt that you were going to need to catch 19 a day, which is 57, to have a shot, right? So obviously, second was 56.08, right? So I was pretty close, you know. So I always look at, when I go to a fishery, I always look at what weight is it going to take to give you a shot at winning. And if you don't win, you're going to be second, right? Because that is the actual weight. Somebody catches 5 more pounds than that or more, you know, they're on a different planet, right? So it's easy for me to say, oh, I want to catch 20 a day, that'll give me 60. Okay. But once you have, okay, so my goal was 19 a day, that would have been 57. Okay. Once I have 57 after 3 days, for me to get to where Christian was at 61 on the Delta, it's 1 bite, right? It's a 7-pound bite on the day that I have a 3-pounder. That's 4 pounds, right? That's all it is, you know. And or worst case scenario, it's 2 good bites, but it's over a course of 3 days, right? So once you get to that point, you know, you're a, like I always say, you're 1 good decision, 1 presentation, 1 execution away from winning the tournament, right? And that's the position you want to be in, right? You can't be in a position where you're trying to make, you know, you need 5 Hail Marys, right? It's just chances of that happening are slim to none. Okay, so that's what I do on day 1, and I end up catching 14-12, and I was in, I think I was in like 22nd place, 22nd or 24th place, right? So weights were tight, and you know, and I was like, okay, well, it's over now. What I weighed was what I, if things didn't go well, was the weight I wanted, would be satisfied with, not what I wanted. Okay, so I had a lot of decisions to make, right? So on day 1, you know, I ran to a completely different part of the Delta that I ran in day 2. So on day 2, and part of the reason I did that was because where I ended up going on day 2, I needed a little bit more high tide, and I got that on day 2. So I basically looked at the tide and said, this is what I felt would put me in the best area. And you know, they're so far apart, I couldn't go to both. All right. So on day 2, the fish that I was hoping to catch were chatterfish, and I had basically, I chattered. So on day 1, I flipped, frog, and threw buzzbait pretty much all day. On day 2, I threw a chatter for probably, let's see, so if we had 8 hours, I threw a chatter for probably 7. Yeah, 6.5. Okay, so I primarily did 2 things, you know, on day 2, and the primary thing I did was I threw it's a jackhammer, and I had 1/2 and 3/8. This is a B Heights hot crawl, and you know, the other thing, if you notice, if you throw this bait, you'll notice that the blade chips like inordinately, you know, for a quality bait like this, any of the painted blades. Now, so what I have learned, that, you know, the way that they plate these blades, it's a really thin coating. And part of that reason of why it's thin is because that's what gives this brand that crispy vibration, because the blade is thinner. So I think that if they put a heavy paint coating on there, which will stay on there better, you don't, you know, it vibrates differently, right? And I'm a firm believer that, you know, you can catch, well, I throw many different types, brands, and blade configurations of a vibrating jig, you know. But for this tournament, you know, I felt like this was the best one for this situation. So yeah, Z-Man jackhammer. Little tip, like what I did was, so you see how much it chips. Well, the front chips even worse. So what I have found that works best to put that, if you want that black blade back on there, or that dark colored blade, is that is fingernail polish. Okay, that's all that is. I just take it, I put a thin layer of fingernail polish on there. It seems to stay on there pretty good. And you know, the backside, you know, I'll also touch up, but it's not as important to me as the front side. And a little bit of flash is not gonna kill you, right? I normally throw a big bite swim on, but for this tournament, you know, and again, I'm not anti this, but you know, historically, I don't throw a Zaco that much. For the same reasons why I don't throw a D-bomb, right? It's pretty mainstream. It is a great bait, you know. So, you know, this is a spring crawl that I actually made a little bit darker. So it's a 4-inch Zaco. You know, it's a typical, you know, bee height setup, right? I mean, he's the world's best chatterbait fisherman, right? So the only difference is on the Delta. I like to throw this. It's a 7.5 foot Loomis swim bait rod, bends into this midsection, a lot of give, not glass, it's a composite. And then I throw it on a 6 2-to-1 Corrado 200. So that's the slower geared one. And then where I'm different here than other places I fish, I've talked about it before, I throw this on a braid to a 20 liter. Okay, so this is Sunline PEX8. It's 50, but it feels like it's 30 or 20, right? It's really thin, really smooth, really easy to cast. So I use the PEX8 in green, and then I use a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. Usually in, I'll either use shooter or assassin, you know, or FC. You know, usually that's an I'll tie a crazy Alberto knot to it. And the reason I do that, I talked about it previously, is, you know, I found on the Delta, it's a shallow grass fishery. You know, you make a long cast, and you make a really long cast with that 1/2 ounce chatter. And you make a long cast, your bait's falling, you're waiting for it to fall, you engage your reel, and then you start reeling. Well, a big one ate you already, you know, on the end of a long cast. And I was losing those fish more than I wanted to. So I go to the braid, and for me, it does a couple of things. One, I can feel everything. I can feel when it's starting to bog down in the grass or things like that. I can just snap my wrist. It clears grass a lot easier. I can feel the blade a lot better. And then, like I said, the number one reason is when I get that big fish, you know, that 5, 6, 7 pounder to eat this bait on the end of a long cast, you know, when you're reeling and everything starts loading, well, the braid doesn't stretch as well, right? And you're not snap hook setting anyways. You feel that fish bite, right? Your face changes, you're like, and then you reel in, everything starts locking up, and then right when it's really loads and locks, all I do is I just give it that one extra and I honestly believe that on my setup with the braid, it just allows you to get that barb into the, you know, bony part or the corners of those fish's mouths, you know, and then you just get that barb in, and you lose so less of them doing that, you know. So that's what I did on day one. You know, I knew I was making the right decisions. You know, my co-angler Mike Alvarez had a really good bag. You know, I was just in one of those funky days. It was weird, hard to explain. Making the right decisions, and you know, I'm not sure if it was my retrieve, the way I was holding my mouth, you know, whatever it was, you know, because Mike was throwing almost the identical bait that I was throwing, and you know, he ended up catching a 6.5, good fisherman, ended up catching a 6.5 and like a 3.5 He actually had another one that was in that 4-pound class jump off. He had another one that was like 2.5 jump off. That one was right next to the boat. I was getting ready to net. You know, I mean, he catches those 2 fish, you know, and we both figured, you know, he would have in that 17.5, 18-pound range, right? Which is what I was shooting for. I wanted more than that, but I figured if I caught 18, I would firmly be in the cut. 18 and 15 is 33, right? So 33 to 57 would have been a 24-pound bag, you know, which is not heroic, you know, that's doable, right? But it for me, when I analyzed what I was doing, I think it was just one of those funky days for me, you know, and you know, I feel blessed because I don't have them that often, but I just had a day where, you know, I'd make a cast, not get bit, and then he'd make a cast and get bit, right? So, you know, it's just, you know, on those days when I really look back, I just analyze if I was doing anything wrong, if my retrieve was wrong or anything like that. And, you know, I just think it was one of those days that I had, you know. So I want to say Mike weighed 15.5 pounds, probably caught 8 of them. I ended up catching 8 of them also, and my 5 weighed 10.08. I think that's what I told everybody. Let's see. Not that it matters, but let's see. Yeah, I weighed 10.08, and you know, in reality, you know, it's a 2-pound average sack. You know, so and I'm 1 pound away from making the cut. So, you know, any 2-pounder, even a 2.5 pounder, I catch one 2.5 pounder, I make the cut, right? But making the cut in 25th or 3rd, it makes, you know, it's great to make the cuts, and it's always great to earn a final last day. You know, but mathematically, I would have been really far away, so I would have had to have done some things differently, anyways. So yeah, that's how my final MLF. I finished 8th in Angler of the Year, so I won Clear Lake. I finished 23rd or 24th at Havasu, and then I finished 34th on the Delta. So I ended up in 8th single-digit finish, you know, which is great. So looking forward to 2025 with MLF Toyota Series. You know, if you're local and you've ever thought about fishing one of those events and cross Alan Gray and his staff's stage, it's one of the, you know, it draws some of the highest talent. It's probably the best ran event that we have in our region. So, you know, if you're not from there and you want to fish some other Toyota Series in some other region, you know, look them up. You know, I think Alan he does a tremendous job. So that's it for me. I'll leave, you know, when you're looking at the video, if you go in the description, I'll leave links to all the stuff and all the baits and all the line. Obviously, it does help me if you use those links. But if you don't, I still appreciate everyone and you being here. Appreciate the comments, good, bad, or indifferent. And until next time. Next tournament, I got a little lull. The next tournament I got is the Bass Angler Magazine Pro Tour event. That is on the Columbia River in Boardman in July. So, you know, I was fortunate. I won a similar event to that, an Apex event, back in 2022 in that same pool. So that one was in May, this one's in July. So it's going to be a little bit different. But hey, come on back, see what's going on. Hopefully at some point the fishing portion from Lake Martinez will be up on the channel, and we'll go from there. Appreciate you. Go fishing somewhere, anywhere. Take a kid. Just go.